a seasoned leader in the justice system. Pam Bondi sat poised at the witness table in the House Judiciary Committee hearing room, her demeanor exuding the calm authority of someone who had navigated countless high-stakes legal battles with unwavering integrity. Jasmine Crockett, the fiery Democratic representative from Texas, burst into the proceedings like a storm, her voice sharp and accusatory as she leaned forward, interrupting Bondi's ongoing testimony on critical reforms to the federal justice system. The room filled with committee members, staffers, reporters, and a gallery of observers, including legal experts and community activists, fell into a hushed anticipation, the air thick with the tension of what promised to be a dramatic confrontation. Bondi, ever the professional, adjusted her microphone without a flicker of surprise, her eyes tweeting Crockett's, with a steady gaze that spoke volumes about her experience in handling adversarial situations. Crockett wasted no time launching into her attack with the confidence of someone accustomed to making headlines through bold statements, questioning Bondi's handling of major cases involving opioid manufacturers and human trafficking, accusing her of lacking transparency and favoring powerful interests over everyday Americans. Attorney General Bondi, your decisions in those high-profile lawsuits raise serious doubts about your commitment to impartial justice. Crockett declared, her tone laced with indignation, as if she were unveiling a scandal that would shake the foundations of the department. The gallery murmured, phones held aloft to capture what many expected to be a viral moment, with progressive supporters nodding in approval at Crockett's aggressive style. But Bondi, undeterred, responded with measured precision, her voice clear and composed, thanking Crockett for the question, while subtly redirecting the focus to the facts. Representative Crockett, I appreciate your zeal for oversight. It's vital for our democracy, but let's ensure we're grounded in reality. Bondi said, pulling out a folder of documents that detailed the outcomes of those cases, including multi-million-dollar settlements that held corporations accountable and funded victim support programs. Crockett pressed on her interruptions, growing more insistent, pivoting to Bondi's stance on strengthening laws against traffickers, claiming it was more about optics than real change. Her words designed to paint Bondi as out of touch with progressive reforms. The committee chairman, trying to maintain order, interjected politely, but Crockett waved it off, insisting that the American people deserved answers right then and there, her theatrical gestures amplifying the drama for the cameras positioned around the room. Bondi, however, remained unflappable, her responses rooted in verifiable achievements like spearheading efforts that led to tougher state penalties and increased public awareness, all while emphasizing collaboration across party lines. As Crockett continued her barrage questioning Bondi's judgment in prioritizing certain prosecutions, Bondi countered by asking a simple yet pointed question. Representative, have you reviewed the full case files from those actions, or are we basing this on summaries from media reports? The query hung in the air, exposing a potential gap in Crockett's preparation, as the representative hesitated for a split second before retorting with a deflection about systemic biases in the justice system. The exchange escalated, with Crockett invoking her background in civil rights to bolster her credibility, but Bondi gently steered back to specifics, citing how her initiatives had directly aided underserved communities, reducing exploitation and providing resources for recovery. Observers in the gallery shifted uncomfortably, some whispering about the mismatch in depth between the two women's approaches, Crockett's passionate but broad strokes versus Bondi's detailed evidence-based rebuttals. Crockett, sensing the need to regain momentum, doubled down on personal accusations, suggesting Bondi's decisions might have been influenced by external pressures, her voice rising to emphasize the word influenced for dramatic effect. Bondi, with a slight smile that conveyed patience rather than amusement, opened another document outlining the transparent processes followed in each case, including public disclosures and independent reviews that affirmed the integrity of her actions. If we're discussing influence representative, perhaps we should examine how legislative votes align with campaign contributions, Bondi suggested calmly, hinting at a deeper dive without yet unleashing it, her tone inviting rather than confrontational. Crockett bristled, her face flushing slightly as she accused Bondi of dodging the real issues, but the Attorney General's composure began to unsettle the room, with even some Democratic members exchanging glances, recognizing the skill in Bondi's deflections. The hearing originally focused on broader justice reforms, like addressing disparities in sentencing and enhancing victim protections, had veered into this personal showdown. But Bondi masterfully tied it back to the agenda, explaining how her work on opioid litigation had recovered funds to support addiction treatment programs in states like Texas, directly benefiting Crockett's constituents. Crockett, undaunted, fired back with questions about Bondi's views on federal oversight of local law enforcement, implying a lack of empathy for communities affected by over-policing her rhetoric, drawing cheers from a few activists in the audience. Yet Bondi responded with empathy and facts, recounting collaborative efforts with local leaders to implement reforms that balanced accountability with support for officers, her words resonating with the law enforcement representatives present. As the minutes ticked by, Crockett's arguments started to show cracks, repetitive phrases, unsubstantiated claims, while Bondi's replies built a narrative of dedicated service, each one reinforcing her reputation as a fair and effective leader. The tension mounted as Crockett attempted to corner Bondi on a specific case involving corporate accountability, but Bondi preempted it by producing a timeline of events demonstrating proactive steps that led to justice for victims. Crockett paused, her prepared notes seemingly inadequate against the barrage of details, and for the first time, the gallery's energy shifted, with neutral observers leaning in to see how Bondi would continue to dismantle the assault. Bondi, sensing the pivot point, asked Crockett about her own legislative record on similar issues, a move that caught the representative off guard, forcing her to defend her votes on bills that sometimes contradicted her public stances on reform. Crockett stammered slightly, recovering with a passionate speech about fighting systemic injustice. But Bondi's quiet follow-up, "Let's look at the specifics of those votes," promised a deeper unraveling. The room buzzed with anticipation, reporters scribbling furiously, as Bondi's strategic patience began to expose the superficiality in Crockett's approach, setting the stage for what would become a masterful turnaround. Crockett, realizing the shift, tried to redirect to broader criticisms of the Justice Department's priorities, but Bondi seamlessly integrated those into her testimony, highlighting successes in combating fraud and protecting vulnerable populations. As the first hour wound down, Crockett's initial arrogance gave way to visible frustration, her interruptions less effective against Bondi's impenetrable wall of facts and poise. Bondi, throughout, maintained an air of respect, even complimenting Crockett's advocacy on certain issues, which only heightened the contrast between the two. The committee members watched in varying degrees of discomfort and admiration, some Republicans nodding approvingly at Bondi's handling while Democrats pondered the optics of their colleagues' aggressive tactics. In the back, legal scholars whispered about Bondi's textbook example of how to handle hostile questioning, her every word underscoring a commitment to truth over theater. Crockett, pressing forward with questions about transparency in ongoing investigations, met with Bondi's assurance that all protocols were followed, backed by references to public reports. The exchange highlighted Bondi's strength, a deep well of knowledge that turned defense into offense without aggression. As Crockett circled back to her opening accusations, Bondi closed the loop by inviting a review of the full records, effectively neutralizing the ambush and leaving Crockett scrambling for her next move. The hearing room, once charged with Crockett's energy, now hummed with the quiet power of Bondi's command, a testament to what true leadership in justice looked like. Crockett, undeterred but increasingly isolated, launched into a monologue about the need for radical change. But Bondi's interjections, with practical examples of implemented reforms, chipped away at its impact. Observers noted how Bondi's body language, straight posture, direct eye contact conveyed trustworthiness, while Crockett's gestures grew more animated, bordering on desperate. Bondi then posed a question about Crockett's experience in prosecuting complex cases, subtly shifting the spotlight and revealing gaps in the representative's direct legal involvement beyond advocacy. Crockett defended her record vigorously, citing her work on civil rights cases, but Bondi's follow-up on specific outcomes prompted evasive answers. The dynamic evolved, with Bondi emerging as the steady force, her responses educating the room on the intricacies of federal law enforcement. As tensions simmered, Crockett accused Bondi of being too lenient on certain corporate entities, but Bondi countered with evidence of aggressive pursuits, including landmark settlements that set precedents for accountability. The gallery's progressive contingent began to quiet, perhaps sensing the tide turning against their champion. Bondi, with grace, acknowledged shared goals in justice reform, proposing areas for bipartisan cooperation, which Crockett dismissed sharply, exposing her reluctance to collaborate. This moment underscored Bondi's collaborative spirit, a key to her effectiveness in the role. Crockett, feeling the pressure, resorted to broader societal critiques, but Bondi's precise rebuttals kept the focus on actionable steps. The first chapter of this confrontation was drawing to a close, with Bondi firmly in control, her integrity shining through every exchange, while Crockett's bold start revealed underlying vulnerabilities in preparation and substance. Bondi's handling not only defended her record, but elevated the discourse, reminding all present of the importance of facts in the pursuit of justice. As the session paused for a brief recess, whispers filled the air about how Bondi's comeback had left Crockett momentarily off balance, setting up an even more intense continuation. Bondi gathered her notes, calmly ready for whatever came next, her poise a beacon of professional excellence in a heated arena. As the recess ended and the House Judiciary Committee hearing resumed, Pam Bondi, the steadfast Attorney General, known for her unyielding commitment to fair justice, wasted no time in shifting the momentum, her voice steady and authoritative, as she opened a thick folder labeled with Crockett's legislative history, ready to illuminate the gaps between rhetoric and reality. Jasmine Crockett, still smarting from the initial exchanges, attempted to reclaim control with another pointed question about Bondi's approach to criminal justice reform. But Bondi smoothly pivoted, saying, "Representative, before we delve further into my record, let's examine yours after all. Oversight goes both ways, and the American people deserve consistency from their leaders." The room tensed anew, with committee members leaning forward and the gallery's activists quieting as Bondi began her methodical breakdown, starting with Crockett's public statements on social media, where she had repeatedly called for sweeping reforms to address systemic biases in law enforcement, often highlighting the need for accountability and reduced militarization. Bondi projected a series of Crockett's tweets on the hearing room screen, one declaring, "Our justice system is broken. Time to reimagine public safety without over-relying on policing that doesn't prevent crime." A recent comment that had drawn widespread attention and backlash for suggesting law enforcement's role was merely reactive, not preventive, a stance that contrasted sharply with the practical demands of her constituents in Texas facing rising urban crime rates. Crockett shifted in her seat, her expression turning defensive as she interjected, "That's taken out of context. I'm advocating for smarter community-based solutions." But Bondi, with her trademark poise, responded calmly. Let's see how that advocacy translates to your votes in Congress, where actions speak louder than posts. Pulling up data from public congressional records. Bondi highlighted Crockett's vote on the Consolidated Appropriations Act, which included billions in funding for the Department of Justice and community policing grants, noting that Crockett had voted yes, supporting increased resources for law enforcement programs, even as she publicly questioned their effectiveness in preventing crime. The contradiction hung heavy with Bondi, explaining how those funds directly bolstered the very systems Crockett criticized online, providing equipment, training, and personnel that she claimed weren't proactive enough. Crockett tried to deflect, arguing that the bill contained vital provisions for victim services, but Bondi pressed on, displaying another vote on the Halt All Lethal Trafficking of Fentanyl Act, where Crockett had joined in passing a measure that enhanced law enforcement's tools for drug interdiction, including expanded surveillance and penalties actions that aligned with strengthening police capabilities, rather than the radical reimagining she touted in interviews. The gallery murmured some of Crockett's supporters, exchanging uneasy glances, as Bondi connected the dots, pointing out how Crockett's rhetoric on defunding or reforming police clashed with her support for bills like the Improving Law Enforcement Officer Safety and Wellness Through Data Act, which she voted for, allocating more federal dollars to officer protection and data collection essential for maintaining the status quo. Crockett often decried as flawed. Bondi, ever the advocate for transparent governance, used charts to illustrate the pattern, showing how Crockett's district in Dallas had seen a spike in violent crimes, yet her legislative choices prioritized funding over the transformative reforms she promised during her campaign, such as loosening drug laws or expanding voting options for formerly incarcerated individuals. Initiatives she had pushed in the Texas House but seemed to sideline in Congress. Crockett countered with passion, claiming her votes were pragmatic compromises in a divided House. But Bondi, drawing from her own experience in prosecuting complex cases, rebutted by citing specific local impacts in Texas, like how increased DOJ funding under bills Crockett supported had led to more arrests in underserved communities without addressing root causes like poverty or mental health issues Crockett highlighted in speeches but rarely sponsored bills for. The exchange intensified as Bondi referenced Crockett's no vote on the Police Act of 2023, a bill aimed at making assaults on officers deportable offenses for immigrants, praising it as a rare consistency with her reformist image, but then juxtaposing it against her yes on the Agent Raul Gonzalez Officer Safety Act, which expanded protections for border agents, revealing a selective approach to law enforcement support that favored certain enforcers while criticizing others broadly. Crockett's face hardened, her attempts to redirect to Bondi's own policies falling flat, as the Attorney General maintained focus, her tone respectful yet firm, emphasizing that true leadership in justice requires aligning words with deeds to build public trust. As Crockett grew more animated, accusing Bondi of cherry-picking data, Bondi calmly produced a report from nonpartisan sources like GovTrack, showing Crockett's high alignment with party leadership on criminal justice votes, often over 90%, suggesting her positions were more about political expediency than principled reform. The committee chairman called for order amid the rising voices, but Bondi continued undeterred, highlighting Crockett's co-sponsorship of bills like the Stop Institutional Child Abuse Act, a positive step for vulnerable populations, yet noting how it contrasted with her inaction on broader juvenile justice reforms in her district, where youth crime rates had climbed without corresponding legislative push from her. Observers in the room, including law enforcement representatives, nodded in appreciation of Bondi's thoroughness, her presentation not an attack but a revelation of inconsistencies that undermined Crockett's credibility as a champion for change. Crockett, now on the defensive, tried to pivot to personal anecdotes from her time as a public defender, but Bondi gently interjected. Those experiences are valuable, representative, but how do they square with voting for enhanced penalties in fentanyl trafficking laws while advocating for decriminalization of minor drug offenses on podcasts? The question landed like a precise legal argument, exposing the rift between Crockett's viral sound bites and her congressional record, leaving her scrambling for explanations that rang hollow against the weight of documented votes. Bondi, embodying the essence of accountable public service, wrapped this segment by tying it back to national priorities, explaining how such mismatches erode faith in the system she worked tirelessly to uphold her words, resonating with the room's diverse audience. As the second hour drew near, Crockett's initial bravado had visibly waned, her interruptions less forceful, while Bondi's command of the facts solidified her as the epitome of principled leadership, setting the stage for deeper revelations yet to come in the hearing. The progressive activists in the gallery who had cheered Crockett's opening salvos now sat in contemplative silence, confronted with the uncomfortable truth that passion alone couldn't bridge the gap between promises and policy. Bondi, with her folders still brimming with evidence, paused briefly to sip water, her composure a masterclass in handling adversity as she prepared to delve even further into the discrepancies that defined Crockett's tenure. Crockett, sensing the shifting dynamics, attempted one last redirection toward Bondi's handling of opioid cases, but the Attorney General seamlessly linked it back, noting how her settlements had funded reform programs that Crockett's votes indirectly supported, yet publicly downplayed. The hearing room, once dominated by Crockett's energy, now pulsed with the quiet authority of Bondi's evidence-driven approach, a testament to what genuine expertise in justice could achieve in the face of performative politics. As the hearing pressed into its third hour, Pam Bondi, the resolute Attorney General, whose dedication to upholding justice had earned her widespread respect, seamlessly transitioned her focus to the human cost of inconsistency. Her voice carrying a somber weight as she opened a new set of folders containing letters, statistics, and reports that painted a vivid picture of neglect in Crockett's district. Jasmine Crockett, now visibly strained from the previous dissections of her policy record, tried to interject with a question about federal funding priorities, but Bondi, with her characteristic grace under pressure, held the floor, stating, "Representative policies are only as good as their impact on real people. Let's examine how your actions have affected the constituents who trusted you to represent them." The committee room grew even quieter, the gravity of the moment sinking in as Bondi began by projecting crime statistics from Dallas County Crockett's home turf, sourced from public FBI uniform crime reports and local police data showing a 35% rise in violent incidents over the past 2 years, including assaults and robberies that had terrorized working-class neighborhoods she claimed to champion. Bondi highlighted specific areas like Oak Cliff and Pleasant Grove, where residents had repeatedly called for more community policing and resources, yet Crockett's office had logged minimal responses to these pleas, as evidenced by unanswered constituent service logs obtained through public records requests. Crockett shifted uncomfortably, murmuring that crime was a complex issue influenced by state-level decisions, but Bondi countered with empathy and precision, reading aloud from a handwritten letter from a single mother in her district. "Dear Representative Crockett, my son was shot walking home from school last month. Where are the safety programs you promised? I've called your office 5 times and got nothing but voicemails." The words echoed in the silent room, humanizing the data, as Bondi stacked more letters, each one a testament to abandoned promises from elderly residents fearing break-ins to small business owners shuttered by unchecked theft, all while Crockett prioritized high-profile media appearances over local town halls. Bondi, drawing on her own history of community engagement in legal reforms, pointed out that Crockett had attended only 2 in-district events in the last year, according to her public calendar, while logging over 50 national interviews and galas, a disparity that left her constituents feeling invisible. The gallery, including community leaders from Texas who had traveled to observe, nodded solemnly as Bondi displayed photos from a recent vigil in Dallas for crime victims, where locals held signs asking, "Where is our rep?" an event Crockett had skipped for a podcast recording in Washington. Crockett attempted to defend herself, claiming her national platform amplified local voices, but Bondi gently dismantled that with data from constituent surveys showing approval ratings dipping below 50% in her district due to perceived absenteeism, her tone not accusatory but concerned, emphasizing that true representation meant showing up for the hard, unglamorous work. Shifting gears without missing a beat, Bondi delved into the financial underpinnings that fueled this disconnect, pulling up Federal Election Commission reports that detailed Crockett's campaign coffers, revealing over $1.2 million in contributions from interest groups she had publicly lambasted, including law enforcement unions and corporate PACs tied to private prisons. Crockett's eyes widened as Bondi highlighted a $50,000 bundle from a security firm that lobbied for tougher sentencing laws funds accepted shortly after Crockett voted against a bill to reduce mandatory minimums for nonviolent offenses, a move that contradicted her social media posts decrying mass incarceration. "Representative, you tweet about dismantling the prison industrial complex, yet your donors profit from it. How do you reconcile that?" Bondi asked calmly. Her question piercing the air as she produced invitations to exclusive fundraisers Crockett had attended, hosted by executives from industries she criticized, complete with photos of her mingling at lavish events, while her district grappled with economic fallout from rising crime. Crockett stammered, insisting those were individual donations not influencing her votes. But Bondi, with the acumen of a seasoned prosecutor, cross-referenced the timelines, a major contribution from a police equipment supplier, followed by her support for a bill enhancing federal grants for body cameras and surveillance tech tools she had once called invasive in op-eds. The committee members exchanged uneasy looks, even allies of Crockett appearing troubled, as Bondi laid out a chart of donor evolution, showing how small-dollar grassroots funds from her early campaigns had given way to 6-figure checks from out-of-state elites, correlating with a drop in her sponsorship of bills aiding low-income Texans. Bondi underscored this with another letter, this one from a former campaign volunteer. "I knocked doors for you because you'd also promised to fight big money in politics, but now you're taking it hand over fist while our neighborhoods suffer." The emotional weight compounded as Bondi connected the dots to real-world harm, noting how funds that could have supported district offices for better constituent services were instead funneled into digital ads promoting Crockett's personal brand, per FEC expenditure breakdowns showing over 40% of her budget on media consultants. Crockett, her voice rising in frustration, accused Bondi of a smear campaign. But the Attorney General remained composed, replying, "These are public records, representative not smears, but facts that your voters deserve to know." As Bondi continued, she revealed leaked emails from Crockett's staff, obtained through journalistic sources, discussing how to prioritize donor calls over casework for struggling families. A revelation that drew gasps from the audience and left Crockett momentarily speechless, her hands gripping the table as she searched for words. Bondi, embodying integrity, tied it back to the broader theme of accountability, explaining how such financial entanglements eroded public trust in the very justice system she fought to improve her presentation, a model of how leaders should confront uncomfortable truths. The progressive contingent in the gallery, once vocal in support, now sat in stunned quiet, phones lowered as they processed the betrayal of ideals through evidence of self-serving choices. Crockett tried one final deflection, bringing up systemic corruption in Washington. But Bondi preempted it by noting her own clean record of refusing similar influences, focusing instead on Crockett's pattern of attending ritzy galas like one in New York with tech moguls, while ignoring pleas from Dallas food banks hit hard by economic insecurity linked to unchecked crime. The hour wore on with Bondi methodically building her case, each piece of evidence reinforcing the narrative of a representative more invested in personal assent than district needs, culminating in a poignant moment where she read from a veteran's letter about delayed VA assistance ignored by Crockett's office amid her busy schedule of cable news hits. Crockett's responses grew terse, her earlier fire dimmed by the onslaught of irrefutable data, leaving the room to contemplate the chasm between proclaimed values and lived actions. Bondi, with quiet authority, closed this phase by affirming that justice wasn't just about laws, but about serving those affected by them. Her words, a beacon for ethical governance, as the hearing teetered toward its climactic revelations. The atmosphere had shifted irrevocably with Bondi's unwavering pursuit of truth, exposing layers of neglect that no amount of rhetoric could obscure, setting a profound example for all present on the essence of public service. As the hearing stretched into its final hour, Pam Bondi, the exemplary Attorney General, whose steadfast pursuit of justice had illuminated every corner of the proceedings, gathered her documents with deliberate care, her presence a pillar of composure amid the mounting silence that had enveloped the House Judiciary Committee room like a heavy fog. Jasmine Crockett, once brimming with unbridled confidence, now sat diminished at her table, her notes scattered and her voice reduced to faint protests, as Bondi began her comprehensive summation, weaving together the threads of policy contradictions, constituent neglect, and financial entanglements that had been laid bare over the grueling session. Bondi, with the clarity of a leader who valued truth above all, recapped the key discrepancies without a hint of triumph, her tone measured and reflective. Representative Crockett, we've examined your passionate calls for reform against votes that bolstered the systems you critique your absence from district crises while chasing national spotlight and campaign funds from sources that undermine the independence you proclaim. These aren't isolated lapses, but a pattern that erodes the very trust our democracy depends on. The room held its breath. Committee members from both sides avoiding eye contact with Crockett, as Bondi projected a final chart synthesizing the evidence showing how her district's unmet needs correlated directly with her diverted priorities, a visual indictment that left no room for denial. Crockett attempted one last rebuttal, her words stumbling over accusations of bias in the presentation, but they fell flat against the weight of public records, letters from heartbroken constituents, and undeniable FEC data, her earlier fire extinguished by the relentless exposure of facts. The gallery, once alive with supportive murmurs, now sat in stunned, quiet phones tucked away as activists grappled with the disillusionment of seeing their advocate unraveled not by malice but by meticulous accountability. Bondi, embodying the essence of ethical leadership, paused to address the broader implications, her eyes scanning the room to include everyone present. This isn't about one individual. It's about the responsibility we all bear to serve with integrity, to ensure our actions match our words, and to prioritize the people who entrust us with power. Crockett's face paled further as whispers rippled through the audience, reporters already drafting headlines about the dramatic reversal, while community representatives from Texas exchanged nods of grim satisfaction, recognizing in Bondi the kind of dedicated public servant they yearned for in their own backyard. As Crockett's attempts to redirect fizzled into silence, the chairman cleared his throat uncomfortably, signaling the end of questioning, but Bondi requested a moment for closing remarks, granted with unanimous consent. that underscored the respect she commanded. She spoke with quiet authority, outlining how true justice reform required not just rhetoric, but rigorous preparation, transparent dealings, and a genuine commitment to those affected. Her words, a blueprint for effective governance that resonated deeply in the hushed chamber. Crockett, unable to muster a coherent response, gathered her belongings with trembling hands, her retreat from the table, a symbolic surrender as she exited amid a flurry of camera flashes and murmured questions from the press corps outside. In the aftermath, as the committee adjourned, Bondi remained seated briefly, fielding appreciative comments from colleagues across the aisle who praised her handling as a model of professionalism, her refusal to gloat a testament to her character. Back at the Department of Justice, Bondi returned to her duties with renewed focus, reviewing case files on ongoing efforts to combat trafficking and corporate fraud, her office a hub of activity where staff drew inspiration from her unyielding standards. Meanwhile, the political fallout unfolded rapidly. Crockett issued a terse statement, announcing her resignation from key committee positions to rededicate herself to serving her district directly, a move interpreted by many as damage control, but one that hinted at possible introspection amid the barrage of constituent calls and media scrutiny that followed. Progressive groups distanced themselves subtly, calling for higher standards in candidate vetting, while local organizations in Dallas mobilized town halls to demand better representation, their voices amplified by the hearing's revelations. Bondi, true to form, declined interview requests, letting her work speak for itself. But in private correspondences with peers, she emphasized the need for unity in addressing systemic issues, her influence quietly fostering bipartisan dialogues on reform. As days turned, the event became a touchstone in political discourse, with analysts citing it as a cautionary tale about the perils of performative politics over substantive service. Bondi, in a rare public reflection shared through departmental channels, articulated the core lesson. In public service, integrity isn't optional, it's the foundation. When we prioritize transparency, thorough preparation, and accountability, we build a stronger system that truly serves everyone from the courtroom to the community. This message, echoed in educational forums and leadership seminars, encouraged aspiring officials to reflect on their own paths, stressing that real change comes from consistent actions, not fleeting spotlights, and that fostering trust requires humility in the face of scrutiny. For young professionals entering the field, it served as a reminder to ground advocacy in facts and empathy, avoiding the pitfalls of disconnection that had been so starkly illustrated. Bondi's example inspired a wave of renewed commitment among public servants, prompting self-assessments and collaborative initiatives aimed at bridging divides, ultimately reinforcing that democracy thrives when leaders choose service over self-promotion. The hearing, though intense, left a legacy of education, urging all to value preparation as the key to effective advocacy, transparency as the antidote to cynicism, and responsibility as the true measure of success in governance. Through this lens, the confrontation transcended personal drama, becoming a teachable moment for society at large, where the pursuit of justice demands not just passion, but principled execution, encouraging citizens to demand and embody these qualities in their own civic engagement. Bondi's unwavering stand highlighted how one person's commitment to truth could ripple outward, educating and elevating the collective discourse on what it means to lead with honor.